Man, Christopher Bell cannot be stopped right now. Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Phoenix Raceway, the 1 mile track that provides some entertaining racing from the moment they drop a green flag and they all go barreling down that dog leg off into turn number 1, 3 and 4 wide, multiple lanes, getting back onto the track. Phoenix has been a very interesting racetrack over the years since we moved the start-finish line over towards the dog leg, and it definitely made for some interesting racing yesterday in the desert at the track where we will host the championship in the fall. Yesterday we had a lot of comers and goers throughout the race, but at the end of the day, one man came out on top, and he's the guy that just can't seem to stop winning right now. Let's get into all that went down in the desert. Number 1, for whom the bell tolls. 3 times. Christopher Bell becomes the first 3-in-a-row winner in the next-gen era as he won yesterday's Shriners Children's 500 at Phoenix Raceway in an epic battle at the end of the race, edging out his teammate Denny Hamlin for the victory, holding off Hamlin, Kyle Larson, Josh Berry, and Chris Buescher for the victory. What can you say about Christopher Bell right now, other than he's on a roll? He's clearly the championship favorite right now, even though we still have a lot of season left to go. But already, this 20 team is clicking on all cylinders. They had a really good car yesterday, the entire weekend in general. Of course, Christopher Bell was the defending spring winner of this race. He won this race a year ago, and in the fall race, he came in not a member of the championship 4 because of the weekend prior at Martinsville, where he was violated for breaking the rule book for a brief ride along the wall, barely, off of turn number 4 in the last lap of Martinsville that ultimately had NASCAR disqualify him from his finishing position and dropped him to the last car lap down, preventing him from going to the championship 4 in Phoenix because he was with a tie with William Byron at the moment that checker flag flew until NASCAR looked it over and said, nope, you're not going, you violated the rules. And that pretty much left a sour taste in Christopher Bell's mouth, but honestly, it gave him some motivation for 2025. And other than the Daytona 500 finish, even though he almost had a chance to win that race towards the end before he got wrecked, Christopher Bell has just been unstoppable. The winner at Atlanta, winner last weekend at Circuit of the Americas, and winning yesterday's race. Once again, a really good race car, particularly on those long rides. It seemed like the 20 car, other than a couple of his competitors, had the best long run speed out of anybody. He was pretty much untouchable. Even with some of these late race cautions where we had guys bunch back up. The first caution that kind of got everybody back together for, the final 40 lap dash to the finish was when Bubba Wallace broke a brake rotor off into turn number 1 and put some debris down with the rotor, generating a caution. Everybody came down to pit road, and a lot of those guys were trying their best to get by Christopher Bell, even though he was pretty tough to handle on those restarts. He always got good launches yesterday, and no matter what obstacle he faced, even with 2 more late race yellows that included Ryan Blaney blowing up or his teammate Ty Gibbs with 8 laps to go, losing a brake rotor going off into turn number 3, setting up a green-white checkered finish in regulation. Bell had to fight and duke it out with his teammate Denny Hamlin on that green-white checker finish because of the late yellows, and Denny Hamlin did not give up without a fight. Bell had to fight his teammate for it, but they raced each other respectfully, and that's what you do when you are teammates with a competitor that you're racing for the win. You race each other with respect and dignity. And on the last lap, Hamlin seemed to have the advantage off the dog leg, but then Christopher Bell tried to carry the momentum, and they came off of turn 2 side by side, and then they come down into turn number 3. Bell slides up the track a little bit, even though he left Hamlin a lane up there, and Bell slid up the track, trying to cut off the 11 from having a big run off the top, and then behind him, Kyle Larson, the 5 car, trying to rally, but can't get done, and Bell edges out his teammate at the line for the victory. The second closest finish in Phoenix Raceway history behind the 2016 finish between Kevin Harvick and Carl Edwards, where Harvick beat Edwards by 1/100th of a second. That finish yesterday was top finish at the end of yesterday's race was absolutely amazing. But again, Christopher Bell and the 20 team is just on a complete roll right now. And he seems to really love these 1 mile tracks, especially when he has a good race car. And you think that his winning streak might stop? It may not stop, because the next 2 races are 1.5-mile tracks where we've seen Christopher Bell excel at in the past. And they're tracks where you run multiple grooves and try to spread out around the track when it comes to your driving ability. And Vegas and Homestead certainly play into Christopher Bell's hands. He's good at both of those racetracks, so I would highly expect that 20 car to once again be factors in those next two races. But yesterday, he got the job done despite a challenge from his teammate in a green-white checker battle. It was a thrilling finish all the way to the very end. So big congratulations to Christopher Bell and the 20 team on their third win in a row. Nobody's won 3 races in a row with this next-gen car. But Christopher Bell can say he has done it. So once again, congrats to Christopher Bell and the 20 team on a great win yesterday. Number 2, solid results for a lot of our top finishers. Kicking it off with second place finisher Denny Hamlin, who came oh so close to preventing his teammate from having a 3-race winning streak. He came oh so close yesterday in his sports clips at number 11. But you can't blame Hamlin for trying. And for one thing, he gave his teammate a lot of respect when they raced each other hard and clean those final 2 laps, duking it out for the win. Hamlin, I felt like, had the advantage when he got a little bit of a jump on the restart. But even though Bell beat him to the restart zone, Hamlin got a good, nice launch, and he was able to carry that and hold off Bell just by inches as they took the white flag. But down the turns 1 and 2 and down the back straightaway, the two teammates were side by side, and heading into 3, Bell scooted up the track even though Hamlin was out there to his outside. Even though he gave him a fair amount of room, they didn't door slam each other coming to the start-finish line. They raced each other respectfully, and at the end of the day, Hamlin comes out with a runner-up finish, but it's a good result. His best result of the season by far, because he got taken out late in the Daytona 500 with a wreck on the last lap. He, had a okay day at Atlanta, but not really the best. And he didn't really do the best last weekend at Circuit of the Americas, considering that, his road course program last few years hasn't really been that good. Of course, he got into Austin Dillon late in the race, which set up the last restart of the day, even though his teammate went on to win the race. But yesterday, Denny Hamlin had a quiet but really, conservative, smart day yesterday. He didn't make a whole lot of noise, but at the end of the day, you come out of there with a top 2 finish, you're building momentum for yourself. Eventually, Denny Hamlin, he'll get to victory lane, and when he wins, he gets hot. Then we go to third place finisher Kyle Larson. A really good result. His best finish of the year and an impressive performance given what happened to him in the 5 team last week, where he left pit road, but they didn't tighten one of the wheels up, and therefore they lost the wheel on the track. It brought out a caution, and he lost his jackman and his tire changer, I believe, on the right rear for this weekend's race and the upcoming race at Las Vegas. But that didn't seem to hurt Kyle Larson really at all. They had a good car yesterday, particularly on the short runs, I think is where they truly excelled at. Long run speed was their Achilles heel. They didn't really have it yesterday when it came to long runs. None of the Hendrick cars really had it, to be honest with you. But Larson, when we had some of those late race restarts at the end of the race, as well as the softer tire that he was running, he became a factor and was kind of keeping up with those 2 Joe Gibbs cars at the front of the field and had a chance at the very end of that race. If those 2 got a little too high through turn 3 a little bit earlier on that last lap, and Kyle Larson probably could have pulled by on the inside and maybe won the race. We'll never know. But nonetheless, a really good performance considering the circumstances he and the 5 team dealt with last weekend with the loose wheel and everything. But a great result nonetheless for Kyle Larson and the 5 team. And then Josh Berry with a 4th place finish for the Wood Brothers. By far the Wood Brothers' best performance in the next-gen era on a track that is not a super speedway, a Daytona, a Talladega, or nowadays an Atlanta. Josh Berry had a great performance the entire weekend, qualified in the top 5, and pretty much ran inside the top 5, top 10 for a lot of the race yesterday. They did have a problem in one of their pit stops early in the race that pinned them deep in the field. Thankfully, they were able to negotiate through traffic by putting on the softer tire option at the beginning of it. But he was able to pick his way back up through the field, not just with those soft tires, but a good race car. Him and that number 21 team and his brand new crew chief, they were doing a really good job so far, bringing a little more speed to the track. Obviously, some of the results the first few weeks haven't shown up for the 21 team, even though they were so good at Atlanta a few weeks ago. Yesterday was by far their best performance on a track that was not a super speedway, and showed what could be possible with Josh Berry and the number 21 team. Of course, we all know that the last couple of years have not been kind to the Wood Brothers. Despite that win at Daytona last year in the summer with Harrison Burton, they hadn't been performing well. They weren't competing with the team that they shared an alliance with in Team Penske. So they told Harrison Burton, listen, buddy, we're going to have to move off of you and go in a different direction. And they went and got a good candidate in Josh Berry, who runs really well with these next-gen cars on the shorter tracks, as it kind of relates to the modifieds that he's been accustomed to driving in the past. So it was a really good performance yesterday by Josh Berry and the 21 team. I don't know if they had anything for the win there at the very end, but you can make a good argument yesterday. He was one of the top 3 Fords in that race. Very, very impressive, and hopefully a sign of more good runs to come for this number 21 team, because we all know how historic and legendary the Wood brothers have been in the sport since we started this incredible sport in 1948, and the Wood brothers have been there almost since the beginning. They've won so many coveted races, Daytona 500s, Southern 500s, Coke 600s, you name it. They've won a lot of marquee events, but the last couple of years for them have been a little bit down because of how they've been performing. But yesterday was a nice shot in the arm, and hopefully a sign of good things to come for Josh Berry and the Wood brothers. So great runs yesterday by both Hamlin, Larson, and Berry. Number 3, up and down day for a defending champion. Joey Logano had quite a day yesterday, folks. The guy who came back to the track where he won his 3rd championship last year had to go through a lot. He started on the front row yesterday alongside William Byron, and early on it looked like he had one of the fast race cars, even taking the lead on lap 1 from the 24 car, then relinquishing it, and then getting it back briefly before we had our second caution. Then when we restarted the race for the second time, Joey Logano made a mistake. When you're coming to the start-finish line here in Phoenix, there is a yellow line on the apron of the racetrack next to the start-finish line. You are not allowed to touch that yellow line before you get to the start-finish line, as they consider that an out-of-bounds violation. Now, once you pass the restart zone and everything, we're green, you can pass down there with no problem at all, but you cannot pass or touch that yellow line when we are in a restart sequence. And unfortunately yesterday, Joey Logano had that penalty hit to him on that second restart, and it's outlined in black and white. NASCAR said, do not touch that yellow line before you get to that start-finish line. And it's by inches. He barely touches it, even though Joey Logano and Paul Wolfe were not happy with the call, saying there's no way we touch that line. But unfortunately, NASCAR had to make that call, and it was very clear that he was touching that yellow line by inches. It's a slim, but he touched it, and he had to serve a pass-through penalty because of that. He did not lose a lap, thankfully. He was able to stay on the lead lap, but he lost all of his track position, so we had to take an alternative strategy by putting on one of the 2 softer compound tires that we had for the weekend, and that was his first of 2 sets that he had to use, so put him at a disadvantage later in the race if he were to be in contention. Those soft tires that he used were allowed him to recover and pick his way up through the field to the point where he was taking the lead in the middle of stage number 2, and he had to try to manage those softer tires at the end of that stage. But unfortunately, Christopher Bell was able to get by him and take stage number 2 from him. It was still a good recovery to get up there and salvage some stage points. Then we get to the final stage. Everybody puts on those primary tires, and Logano stays in sequence with everybody. But when we had those cautions late in the race, Logano knew at the time, when he used that last soft compound tire, he was absolutely in trouble. Because when you put on the primary tires for this weekend, it seemed to be at a disadvantage on the get-up speed laps until we got a couple laps of green flag racing in. The primaries would kick in, softs would fall down. But Joey Logano, unfortunately, yesterday, being one set down compared to everybody else in those last few restarts, he was at a major disadvantage, and he had to go backwards and everything. And even though he was able to come in and get a set of primary tires at the very end of the race and rally to finish 13th, which is his best result of the season so far, if my memory serves me right. If not, it was an 11th place at Atlanta. But Joey Logano, possibly a missed opportunity yesterday, because they had one of the top 3 fastest cars, in my opinion. Him, Bell, William Byron, by far the 3 best cars yesterday, and it just, it sucks. But once again, the penalty with the 22 car, they have it in black and white. He violated it, and once again, if NASCAR's not going to make that decision at all, then they're just, being inconsistent by not being consistent in making calls when determining whether you have crossed the line as far as violating one of the NASCAR rules in the rule book, or, when it comes to determining when to throw the yellow and green, white checkers. They had to make this decision. They got it right, in my opinion, and that's what happened to the 22 team yesterday. So it sucks, but the speed was there, and hopefully optimism that they'll come back here maybe as a championship 4 contender in the fall, and hope that the restart violation that he did early in the race, he will not make that same mistake again. Number 4, tire options. This weekend, Phoenix Raceway, we had our second points race with this tire compound that Goodyear brought this weekend. We had the yellow Goodyear lettering circulating it as the primary tires. But we also brought an option tire for this weekend, a softer compound with red lettering. The difference is the softer tire is grippier and has got more grip at the beginning and makes the car faster, but it wears quicker than it normally does. It wears quicker compared to the primary. Primary tires, they do not have as much grip at the beginning, but they last longer than the softs do. And yesterday's race, we saw a lot of comers and goers when it came to using the tires and everything. Everybody started the race on primaries, but after 2 cautions into the race, some guys elected to come in and put in a set of softer compound tires at the beginning of the race to try to get some track position and put themselves in sync with everybody else up at the front of the field. And some of those guys, like Ryan Preece, for example, put on those soft tires and drove their way through the field, and you could tell that the softer tires made a difference when it came to speed and, how they were performing, moving in their way up through the field. And it was fun to see some of these teams yesterday pick and choose between when to put on the soft tire versus when to try to save them for later in the race when it mattered the most. And some of those guys early in the race that used those soft compound tires, it gained them advantage to getting some track position, but put them at a disadvantage later in the race when other guys that didn't even use any of their sets of soft compound tires in the weekend, they were able to put those on and pretty much put the other guys that had already used a set and put them back in one set behind at a major disadvantage. It was very interesting to see a lot of these guys go back and forth. Of course, I mentioned Joey Logano. He put on some soft compound tires at the beginning of stage number 2 to try to get back some of that track position he lost due to the penalty for the restart violation. And of course, other guys did the same thing as well in stage number 2. But some of the other guys, like, of course, Christopher Bell, the winner, William Byron in the 24, Kyle Larson and those guys, they didn't touch those soft compound tires until later in the race when it truly mattered. Of course, they used it at the beginning of the final stage, and then some of those guys saved that last set when it came time to the end of the race, like with 40 laps to go. Everybody else that had the last set of soft compounds left in the pits, they put those on, and a lot of them were able to gain more spots than normal and get some solid finishes out of the day. And of course, the 20 car was the winner. So what was my overall thoughts with the soft and primary tires this weekend? The strategy between who would use them early on versus who would use them for later in the race made it very, very interesting. Again, lots of guys went from the back to the front because of the softer tires being used at the beginning of the race, and then you had guys gain back some of their track position at the end of the race because they had another set of soft tires versus everybody else that had used some of them already. It was very, very interesting to watch this. And one thing I think that was watching this race, we determined which type of tires that we can use for the championship race in the fall. I think based on what we saw from the softer tires, that Goodyear, I don't know if they're going to bring the 2 option tire for the fall, but looking at the data, of course, Goodyear has been trying to help make racing really good, especially with the right compound of Goodyear tires. We had a softer tire at Circuit of the Americas last week for a road course, and it made for some really, really good racing. And I think yesterday with the option tires, balancing out with primaries, made it very interesting as well. But I think a softer tire option would be best suited for the championship race when we come back here in the fall. And I know that NASCAR and Goodyear will be working diligently hard to figure out what type of soft tire they want to bring here. I feel like one that can definitely have some good long run speed to it. If the wear lasts long enough, even if it wears out quicker, it could provide for some guys slipping and sliding and then try to manage those tires. But we don't want all the tires blowing out. That's one thing we do not want. So a very interesting race yesterday with 2 tire options. And number 5, the racing in general yesterday at Phoenix, I felt like with the tire options, it made for some very interesting action on the track. With the restarts are always fun here at Phoenix, of course. Sometimes you can get yourselves in some precarious spots like some wrecks. We had a couple of them early on, like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. going around the middle of the pack and collecting Cole Custer. And then we had the big one on lap number 99 where guys were 4 wide off of turn 2, and it looked like Ty Gibbs maybe got a little loose, squeezed the 7 car of Justin Haley up into Chase Briscoe, and Briscoe ricocheted right into Carson Hocevar and took out a lot of guys, including Brad Keselowski, Noah Gragson, Cole Custer got involved, Riley Herbst and Shane Van Gisbergen, and a lot of guys got caught up in that wreck yesterday. And then we had a couple other guys have some rough luck late in the race, like Daniel Suarez, who had one of his better runs of the season, but unfortunately he had nowhere to go when the 78 car of Catherine Legge, who was making her Cup Series debut driving for Ledvest Motorsports, lost it off of turn 2, and Suarez had nowhere to go and just drove in her door and pretty much took Suarez out of a possible top 5, top 10 finish. Definitely sucks because he cannot catch a break this year. And then, of course, late in the race, I mentioned Bubba Wallace had the brake rotor failure into turn 1, taking him out of a possible top 10. And Ty Gibbs, who has just been It seems like ever since last year's Roval race, a lightning bolt will strike down on Ty Gibbs at any moment in the race and pretty much ruin his entire race. It's been that kind of stretch for Ty Gibbs. It's not been good at all, and he needs to find some form of consistency, or else they're going to be way behind the 8 ball, and I feel like they already are right now with the way things have been going. But I felt like yesterday, with the tire compounds that we brought, with the primaries and bringing in the options, all the comers and goers, and all these restarts that we had, it was one of the more better Phoenix races that I've seen here with this next-gen car, with the tire options that we brought. If we bring a softer tire option, as I mentioned, to the championship race in the fall, it's going to be very interesting. I feel like maybe not bringing, the option tires would be the best, and just bring only a standard softer tire for everybody to run instead of an option, because the guys battling for the championship, they want to stay in sync with each other and not get off sequence. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. But again, the restarts, the tire options, made for one of the more interesting strategic Phoenix races that I've seen in quite some time. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the finish of the race, I think, made it a lot better. Now we're going for a 1.5-mile track, not a drafting track, a traditional 1.5-mile track where you run anywhere you want to on the racetrack, and that would be Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Next week, these guys are going to hope to cash in big, or some of them might not hit the jackpot and crap out. There are going to be a lot of guys trying to fight for some really good results next week, and guys that need to hit the luck bank, like a Ty Gibbs, a Brian Kozlowski, a Daniel Suarez, heck, even a Cole Custer, because they're not off to a good start so far, and they've got to turn their luck around. Or other guys, of course, Byron and Bell, they're the two best cars right now, and they're just having a monster start to 2025. But there are other guys that are always going to be in the mix, like a Kyle Larson, a Tyler Reddick, a Denny Hamlin, and even a Ryan Blaney and Chase Elliott. They're all going to bring their best next week into Las Vegas. So who's going to cash in big? We'll find out. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a very entertaining 1.5-mile race. And Vegas, over the last couple of years, it's become a very underrated 1.5-mile track for some competitive racing, I might say. Especially restarts. They are a lot of fun to watch there, too. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Subscribe, like, and congrats once again to Christopher Bell and the 20 team on their 3rd consecutive win this season. Have a great week, everybody. Let's go racing!